Okay, so good afternoon everyone. Welcome to the round table. As you know, this round table is about the new international order we are asking ourselves and challenges for the European Union. So, over the past decade, the global economic landscape has undergone profound transformations, and the assumptions that are underpinning in the past the globalization process and the liberal international order are increasingly being questioned right now, and we are witnessing the return of geopolitics in trade, geopolitics in finance, and also even in technology. So we are also witnessing growing rivalry between major powers, and as a result of that, we are seeing the reconfiguration of the global value chains under the pressure of economic security concerns, and also with the imperative of the climate change. So, as a result of this, for Europe, all these shifts are posing fundamental challenges. And the European Union must navigate an environment that is marked by the concept of fragmentation. Fragmentation is in fashion. Strategic competition was even in fashion earlier. The concept of strategic competition, and now what is in really fashion is the term of uncertainty for everything. And at the same time, the European Union has to preserve, dealing with these concepts, its economic openness. It has to advance in its green and digital transition, and has to reinforce its capacity for collective action. So the question that we are addressing today in this table is how the European Union can redefine its position and strengthen its resilience within the evolving international order. So to discuss this issue, we are fortunate to have with us today three distinguished scholars, three distinguished experts that will bring us a unique perspective from academia, from central banking, and also from the applied economic research. So the first of our panelists is Professor Andreas Fuchs from the University of Goettingen. He's one of the leading scholars now on international political economy, with a wide-ranging research on development finance, on trade policy, and also on China's global economic engagement. And I'm sure that he will help us to frame the debate by examining the broader global context and the ongoing shifts in power that are now reshaping the international institutions, and what all these changes are meaning for multilateralism, for the future of multilateralism. And secondly, we have with us Dr. Javier Pérez, that is the Deputy Director General for Economic Affairs, Economics at the Banco de España. He has a deep expertise in European economic governance, in fiscal frameworks, and also in macroeconomic policy coordination. So hopefully he will address how the European Union is responding to this new global environment, the policy tools that we have at our hands, the institutional capacities, and the potential reforms needed to ensure stability and strategic autonomy, mostly. And finally, we have with us Dr. Javier Martínez Turégano. David, what is it? David Martínez Turégano from CaixaBank Research. And David is combining academic insight, very deep academic insight, with the practitioner's view on financial markets and economic competitiveness. He has been also working for the European Commission for many years, and he will focus on how geopolitical tensions and structural transformations, such as technological rivalry and green transition, are influencing financial markets, corporate strategies, but also the EU's economic position in the world. So we are expecting that each panelist will make a brief introductory remark, some remarks about maybe 10, 12 minutes at most. And then after that, we will open the floor for discussion and questions from the audience. So our goal today is not just to diagnose the challenges, but also to reflect on what kind of international order we are opening up and how Europe can shape this new order rather than simply adapt to it, adapt itself to it. So without further ado, so thank you very much for being here with us. I hope that it will be a fruitful conversation. Thank you.
So here you see the globalization index from 1970 until more or less today. So in green, it's economic globalization we care most about, social globalization, political globalization. It's measured between 0 and 100, 100 meaning the maximum value you find anywhere on any indicator in the world. So we observe an increasing globalization, economic globalization, up until the global financial crisis, and then it's flat. Political globalization keeps increasing a bit longer, but at a lower pace, and now it's flat. And social globalization as well kept increasing a bit longer. Now it's flat, and there are signs of even disintegration. And I thought it's nice, so we are here at the 22nd INTECO workshop, also to have a vertical line indicating the first INTECO workshop in 2004 and what has happened since then. I'm not claiming any causality, no worries, yeah. No diff and diff, yeah, but just highlighting what has changed since this important initiative has started, and probably analyzing economic integration is now more important than ever. So globalization is slowing down. We are in a period of globalization, and we saw the global financial crisis, Brexit, US-China trade war, COVID, Ukraine wars, and now the second Trump administration. So I'm not just a development economist, international political economist. I'm coming from a German university, so I thought I should also somehow represent Germany. So to let you know what the debate in Germany is, and there we speak of Zeitenwende. No worries, it's the only German word I'm going to use today, which is a German word for a historical shift in time. So this is how the Ukraine war in 2022, which of course already started in 2014, was perceived. And now more and more people also speak of a second Zeitenwende, and this is associated with the Vance speech at the Munich summit earlier this year. So the retreat of Russia from Europe, or the attack, and also now the retreat of the US. So now I would like for this stock-taking part to zoom in on trade, and I like a lot a quite recent IMF report, but I know people in the room are working on similar things, but this nicely summarizes the situation in the trade area, so that, okay, we saw this slowing down of globalization, but the trade is fragmenting, and here you have trade growth within blocks minus trade growth between blocks post-Ukraine war, and blocks are defined based on a 2022 vote in the United Nations General Assembly, so still before Trump, and you observe that trade is much more increasing within blocks than it's increasing between blocks. So in other words, so the disintegration, if you want, is unevenly distributed. I thought it's also nice to zoom in on a specific case. We all know that it's now difficult to to import rare earth, for example, into the European Union. This is very visible, but we did some effort to also get at more hidden politicization of trade, and we looked specifically at Chinese exports during the corona pandemic, and here at exports of face masks, a good we don't care about anymore, but during the pandemic, so this was a life-saving good the whole world wanted, because we could save lives with it. So prices were skyrocketing, and what we did in the paper is we looked at the effect of UNGA agreement, which you find on the top right. And there we observe it was much easier for countries to secure access to these critical goods if you have a close voting alignment in the United Nations as a proxy for political alignment. Interestingly, you pay the same price. You get the goods if you are a friend of China, but it's not cheaper. And one other layer we looked at is subnational linkages, so less official linkages, and we looked at sister linkages between cities, between provinces, and there we also found it was much easier to get access to these critical goods, and there also we find some evidence for these subnational linkages that you also got a cheaper price. So one specific example of this geo-economic fragmentation we observe in the area of trade. The second stock-taking part is on aid and investment, which I also work on a lot. So here's Africa, and I summed up all official development assistance by European Union and European Union member countries, all of China's assistance. So European Union is in blue, China is in red, USA is the largest provider of official development assistance in all these green countries, and Japan in the yellow one. So looking at this, no red spot. But of course, if you extend the definition, you'll also look at all development finance, including less concessional flows. These big infrastructure projects, building roads and railways, the continent is already quite red, highlighting that something is changing there. And again, there's a huge politicization, not just of trade, but also of aid and investment. So here I looked at other official flows to these big infrastructure projects. On the top left, very obvious, you get much more if you recognize the government in Beijing. You get nothing if you recognize the government on Taiwan, obviously, and if you are in between, if you are a switcher between the two. On the top right, you are in voting alignment. If you have a close voting alignment in the United Nations, you get most projects. Oil matters in certain contexts, and of course China wants the money to get paid back, so lower middle income countries get most projects, less than low income countries. And all this matters. In another study we looked at soft power effects, and if there's a project in your neighborhood, we showed causal evidence that after the end of Chinese projects we observe an increase in approval ratings of the Chinese government using survey data, highlighting these soft power effects. So what do we do with this? With the politicization of trade, with the politicization of aid and investment. So let's come to the big question, where is the EU heading? And here I sketched two extreme scenarios. And I introduced this term of Zeitenwende, which was used for the Ukraine invasion, and now the Vance speech, the retreat of the US, as second Zeitenwende. So one bad extreme scenario would be a third Zeitenwende, and this is with the rising nationalist parties in France, UK, and other major countries, that there's a retreat of a big country from Europe. So like assume, which is not unlikely, that Le Pen or a substitute comes to power. So this could initiate a third Zeitenwende we should care about. Another extreme scenario would be a United States of Europe. So observing this geo-economic fragmentation and realizing that single countries are not powerful enough to negotiate and to achieve their interests. Of course, further steps, integration steps, are possible, and here I described the extreme scenario. So the likely outcome is, of course, something in between. So recommendations for the EU, and I ask, do we need a vision? So China has a clear vision and a clear strategy. Vision is becoming the world power in 2049, and they are investing a lot of money into telling the China story well. And also Donald Trump has a vision, make America great again, which is copied around the world. So, but what is Europe's vision? What is the good, positive story we tell the world? And I have no answer. So where are we heading? What's our plan for 2050? Maybe a CO2 free society, but this is also associated with a negative vision, because this is also some hope, a bit maybe hopeless, or So that's why recommendations for the EU is a positive European counter model to Trumpism. So the US, we observe the US withdraws from free trade. How should the European Union respond? Deepen open rules-based trade with like-minded partners. The US restricts migration. Europe should attract global talent. That's great. We can have a brain gain. Then they can drive innovation and demographic resilience. The US cuts research funding. Europe can preserve or even expand R&D, innovation ecosystems, and academic openness, which is under threat. US shuts down its foreign aid. USAID abandoned. Europe should maintain and modernize its development climate and humanitarian commitment. Maintain, which is budget neutral, and recognizing that, of course, we have significant budget constraints. Yes, and why should we do this? We are economists, so we, at least the consensus among us is that trade is good for development, migration is good for development, research is good for development. So if this is true, what is large consensus among economists, then the European Union will also succeed with time. And I would like to close with a paper by my colleagues from the Kiel Institute, Christoph Trebesch and Moritz Schularik, and they have published 2 years ago in the American Economic Review a paper called Populist Leaders and the Economy, and that show that with time, populists perform much worse. Not initially, it takes time, and they also identify the mechanisms: protectionism, unsustainable fiscal policies, and the erosion of institutions, which we believe are good for economic development. So this strategy could pay off in the midterm. Okay, so probably I'm a bit over time, but yeah, thanks.
Gracias.
Escape.
¿Qué hago? ¿Qué hago?
Tú dale al escape. ¿Qué quieres que...?
Compartir, o sea, que esta se ve ahí.
Ok, vale. Pues hacemos aquí. Vale. Ya estábamos compartiendo, ¿eh?
Entonces hay que cerrar
claro,
la anterior.
Ya está. Tú aquí bajas y ahora ya...
No, está
si
compartiendo la de
cierras,
antes.
exacto.
No, pero esa es la mía.
Esta es la tuya. Pues ya
Esta
está.
es la
Si
mía.
ahora tú la proyectas, pantalla con... Bueno, quita eso.
No, digo, sí. No sé si hay que cerrar la otra. No. Que no.
Perdón.
O sea, no, que me digas que está. No está.
Vale.
Tengo que cerrar.
Esta.
Esta es la tuya.
Esta, ¿no?
A ver, si digo aceptar aquí, ¿pasa algo?
No, da igual. No.
No explota nada, ¿no? What?
A ver.
You have to duplicate the screen.
No, we are. The thumb up is okay. The thing is that here
Yeah, duplicate the screen.
we are projecting yours, isn't it?
Yeah.
So he wants to close this.
Yes.
So
Okay, can
we
Yeah, right.
you have to close yours, and that's it. Estaba en PPP, en PowerPoint, y tú tienes PDF.
Cool. Yo no he PhD. Vale.
Ya está, esto está bien, ya está todo bien.
Y lo único es que
Déjalo.
quiero que esta esté en grande.
Ahí estamos.
¿Se funciona? So you need a panel and a PhD to solve this. So thank you so much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here and to share some views, and of course I'll be open to listen to yours. So I'm going to go. I have some slides, but I'm not going to use those. So let me try to complement. This is the chicken game, you know. So then he starts, then some of the ideas are already there. So and then David has has the problem. No? The rest. So let me be more specific on let's say EU dependencies and certain dependencies, complementing what Andreas told, and then trying to see what the EU is doing and what we can do there. No, so trying to go into the direction of what Cecilio was mentioning. No? So on dependencies, and I will go to finance in a second, complementing what Andreas showed. Basically, we have dependencies now which we have to worry about, and this is something that we've been discussing over the 2, 3, 4 couple of past years. With China, we have this dependency on critical raw materials. Andreas was mentioning that. On critical raw materials, in theory, I mean, basically means that materials that the Chinese extract and then process, and they have kind of a monopoly in many directions. It is true that on that, I mean, I'm looking at here and watching at the webpage of the European Commission, where you had the critical raw materials strategy. So basically there is a strategy. So when it is, we have a list. They are trying to find partners. So there is an ongoing strategy. I mean, so far, dependencies are still too high. So remember, very recently we had this issue of China like using export controls on critical raw materials as a way of negotiating, hardening the negotiation with the US, and this was affecting everybody. So this was really scary. This is on hold, no? So on critical raw materials with China, we had this vulnerability, and there is a strategy. Then the second key vulnerability we have with China is basically the sourcing of advanced technology and all technology that has to do with let's say, with the green transition. So we are buying all our solar panels from China. No? And there basically, there is no alternative. So either industry has to be there, so alternatives are really limited, and we cannot stop tomorrow playing with China. But this is more known. No? Now with the US, we have two critical dependencies, which are back are on the table. Were not in the table before, say, April, and are quite important. And I would say that they have the potential to be even more important than any dependency on trade. No? So the first thing is the dependency we have on the Americans on critical financial and payments infrastructures. And the second is the dependency we have on defense. And these two areas have strong economic meaning and impact. No? So just to give you something, this is what you have here. So basically, as you all know, so let me give you a couple of numbers. So 45% of world exports are invoiced in dollars, in US dollars. 35% are invoiced in euros. ¿Qué hago? Okay. Now, better? So I've been talking to myself. Sorry. I'm not going to repeat, sorry. He said, thank you. So, but of course, I mean, the US, I mean, the share of exports in world export of the US is much lower, no? And even if we take this use of the euro, this 35% of the euro, and we just remove all the linkages within the euro area, then the international use of the euro really goes down. No? So first thing, I mean, this is the euro. No? So 10% of global exports go to the United States, 45% of world exports are invoiced in dollars. No? And the euro area is 35%. No? So this is the dollar, no? But then, of course, we have all the payment infrastructures. So payments, your Visa, are American companies, part of those. And there are new payment means. I mean, many of you must have heard about these stable coins, which are supported by dollars. So basically, this is, let's call it private digital money, which is backed by dollars. So a private company issues these stable coins and keeps certain amount of dollars. You know? So this is still like a very sophisticated thing. So the market is not too big, but the opportunity that this offers of making instant payments everywhere in the world and the usage, so it's increasing. So basically, I say we depend pretty much on finance on the Americans, and if these trends in these new payment means go ahead, we are going to depend more. So what's on the table here? So on the table, basically, you have two big projects. One big project is the digital euro. And we were discussing yesterday over dinner about the digital euro. So basically, the digital euro is like, it's to be developed, so it's still ongoing. So only the first phase was closed. And it's just a matter of competing with these stable coins on the digital. So we want people in Kenya to use euros, and then if they use some digital means, they use crypto, they will be using stable coins based in dollars, or now we can offer an alternative. But it's not only about having a broader international role for the euro, it's also about not losing the use of the euro within Europe, no, on many segments. No? So basically, we're discussing, this discussion of the digital euro is just about strategic autonomy. You were talking about strategic autonomy. This is all about this. So there's nothing else, no? Because otherwise, I mean, we have banknotes, we can pay, or we can have we can pay with a transfer, with a Bizum, or whatever. So the digital euro is just it's a piece to compete in the global landscape of digital payments, which is where we're going to be next. First thing. So attached to that is that typically the role of the euro, as I was telling you before, I mean, the euro is basically a regional currency. So there's nothing global. So the euro is widely used, but because we use it among ourselves, so we have economic dynamism. But then, if you don't want to be in a world in which you are too exposed to the dollar, to all this invoicing, your companies are doing trade with people invoicing in dollars, even though it's trade with the euro area. So now there is a movement, and this is a big change for central banking. So before basically April, everybody was saying, so the euro, I mean, this is endogenous. So whoever wants to use the euro will use the euro, but there is no explicit policy of promoting the euro as an international currency. And this has changed completely. I mean, just look at some recent speeches by President Lagarde, by my governor, by many members of the... So there is a policy, I mean, to make the euro like more use. Of course, I mean, we know that people use the currency when they use trade, but you have to go together with other means. So, for example, when you think about the use of the Chinese renminbi, so typically you trade, and then you offer other, let's say, monetary policy elements or liquidity. So, for example, we have all these repo lines where the central bank in this case, of China, provides currency in exchange, to the country which is trading. So far, I mean, we have very limited elements. We have some liquidity lines with certain central banks, but they are basically in Eastern Europe. So we don't have a repo line to provide liquidity to the Central Bank of Brazil, even though we want to trade more with Brazil, and so on and so forth. So this is another trend which is coming and is moving, and it's, okay, let's promote this, but to promote this, you need to put other instruments. So payments, the euro, and some monetary policy tools like this swap or repo lines. This could be in the debate soon. And then the other big dependency I was telling you before, it's defense. So defense means that basically, let's say, in economic terms, so we are subject to geopolitical shocks. We have the Russians there, we have maybe other threats, and typically our defense systems are totally intertwined with the US. But given that we are totally intertwined with the US, there is a lot of equipment, a lot of machinery that we cannot use without US approval. No? So then it comes all these NATO things, and this implies, and then we go more to the economy, then we go to the issue of spending more on defense. No? But then the issue of spending more in defense is not like a theoretical thing, or that people make a big statement saying we're going to spend more on defense, because if you want to spend more on defense, you need to have someone that sells you the equipment. And typically, a lot of this equipment is going to the US and buying that. So basically, the economic impact of that, the multipliers of this defense spending will depend a lot on the import content, because if everything is imported in the limit, then the economic impact, basically you have all the leakages for outside. And then if the way to go is to go to the US for this extended military spending, new extended military spending, which in a sense would be consistent in the US-EU, this principle of agreement, this agreement in principle on trade, there is a clause that says you have to buy a lot of military equipment from me. No? So if we go in that direction, then we will not reduce the dependency, and the fiscal multiplier will be very small. No? But now, moving into the dimension of, okay, we buy made in Europe, then fiscal multipliers are higher, and we reduce dependency, will depend on the size of the industry. And now industries in Europe are quite scattered, so they're not so integrated. So this is a challenge, but there is a strategy there. No? And then finally, for a couple of minutes, yeah, no, let me give you two ideas, just two ideas, on the two additional ideas. Okay, then let's reduce dependencies. No, the one on technology, the one you were talking about, also something that sounded like industrial policy in a sense. No, we're discussing about this. You were mentioning industrial policies. No, so what about industrial policies in the EU so far? No? So what you have here is exploiting this global trade alerts database. So this database, there's some people that are just they're taking the job of, you know, whenever there is a measure that you can label as industrial policy, then you put a tick. No, so there are many. No, there are subsidies to industry. There are many measures of this kind. I mean, it's not only tariffs; it's public procurement policies. So whether you can or cannot, you know, do business, you can apply, let's say, for a public procurement open procedure, is member and capital control, etc., etc. So if you go to those measures announced, the interesting thing is to see, I mean, when a country in the European Union does one of these investment and capital controls, who are the countries outside this country within the European Union which is affected? No, it turns out that many of the measures, given that we don't have like a common industrial policy of a given size, but we're in this industrial policy mood, what we're having is a lot of country industrial policy, so let's say Spanish industrial policy, German industrial policy, that is affecting everybody else within the European Union as well. So these are just the measures, these are number of interventions, so this is 400, whatever, affecting, enacted by one EU country that affects another EU country. No? So one has to be careful with this, you know, we're like saying, okay, let's do industrial policies, because maybe what we want to do is industrial policies at the EU level, because otherwise we will end up fragmenting our single market. And my final point has to do with monetary policy in this context. No? So basically, doing monetary policy in the context of, let's say, more frequent, let's call it supply shocks, and in the context of uncertainty, is kind of harder. No? And of course, behind, let's say, the success of all these non-monetary policies is that monetary policy can do its job. No? So let me just give you an example of how we deal with this, or which is the discussion now, or for you to kind of to get an idea of how the policymaker monetary policy is thinking now. No? So what you have it at the left side, sorry, because I see that it's in Spanish, the title, is inflation in the euro area, as it was forecast, the dashed line, in the September exercise. So we know that the ECB will do forecast 4 times per year. No? So basically, it was, inflation was below the objective, almost to 1.5%. It was the projection, and then it was going up at the end of the. So 2% is the inflation target. So you say a medium run, so it's okay. No, but then this peak in 2027 is related to the entry into force of some of these climate-related measures. So we have this system of these ETS systems of emission permits. So there is one which is entering into force in 2027. This is going to change because it will be postponed. And this is just an increase in prices, so you have inflation going up in the first year. So if you deduct the impact of this measure, then inflation will be like at around 1.6, according to these projections, over the whole projection horizon. So this means that this is below target. No? So some people will say, okay, let's reduce interest rates. No? But then the decision, or you want to be in the minds of these guys, then the point is that which are the risks that we have? Because, I mean, how much can we trust forecasts? And the key message is we can trust forecasts less than in the past, now less than in the past. Why? Because when you think about risk, and just those related to trade that you have in the center panel, so we're concerned about supply chain disruptions. This goes beyond tariffs. We can go into that. I don't want to spend more time on that. And of course, you have all the indirect effects of US policies, increasing tariffs, and then others increasing tariffs as well, so that these are like upward pressures on inflation. But equally likely, let's say, when we think about the scenarios, is that you get this huge trade diversion from China to the EU, and then import prices fall a lot, and then you have deflationary, you're importing deflation from China. And second, then you have higher tariffs, hurting the economy, and then going down. So the story, the balance of risk, when you start plotting scenarios, then you get higher tariffs, meaning affecting the economy, because I mean the tariffs increase prices in whoever puts the tariffs. No? So it's quite equally likely to be above or to be below. No? So basically, the issue now is that in this very uncertain, completely uncertain landscape where you can go to this scenario or to this scenario, so basically monetary policymakers are like doing this thing of, if you listen to the Q&A or to the press conference of Lagarde, is saying, okay, data dependency, we just do, meeting by meeting and we decide. No? Which in a sense can increase the volatility of the economy in the sense that you are just showing to the markets, depending on the data, your reaction, and you cannot guide the markets in the future. No? I'll stop here. We can continue. Thank you.
So good afternoon, and I'm happy to be here again in INTECO. Last year I was in Castellón, some weeks after Donald Trump won US elections, and we discussed on how the EU should get ready to confront these new challenges. Spoiler, we have many Commission-sponsored strategies, but progress so far is not great, we have to say. So, Andreas and Javier have already well explained how the new geopolitical international landscape look like, including some of the strong dependencies that we have in the EU. I will focus my introductory words in highlighting these three main elements. First, how uncertainty and risk is translating into the economy, and particularly how businesses are adapting to this new environment. Second, I will talk about the policies the EU is adopting towards a strategic autonomy, trying to complement what Javier has been presenting. And finally, I will review which are the main elements that are still needed to be addressed based on the recommendations of the Draghi report, including critical discussions that are ongoing on the industrial model and the fiscal dilemma we have in the EU. So in our last monthly report in CaixaBank Research, we included an article on the impact of uncertainty on the euro area and Spain economies. For this purpose, we use the so-called Economic Policy Uncertainty Index, which for sure is very familiar to Javier because Bank of Spain is in charge of elaborating this metric for our country. On the right-hand side chart, taking as a reference the year period that goes from the third quarter of last year to the second quarter of this year, we estimate that the increase of uncertainty has dragged around 0.4 percentage points of GDP in both economies, being the effect larger for the euro area compared to Spain, because Spain is less exposed to the US. And particularly, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that the larger impact is on investment when compared with other components of GDP. Following on the investment aspect, according to European Investment Bank surveys, uncertainty remains as the most cited obstacle for investment plans by firms. Around 80% of the firms mention this aspect as one of the main obstacles to develop investment plans, which is a larger figure than for the US and is well ahead of other elements that are usually mentioned by firms, like the availability of skilled staff, regulation, or energy costs. On the on the issue of how businesses are adapting to this new environment, again, based on some surveys conducted by the European Investment Bank. Let's, here in this slide, we can have a look at the different stages of the value chain and which kind of disruptions are affecting firms and how these firms are reacting to these disruptions. So first, in the first stage, input sourcing, that has been subject to considerable supply disruptions, logistic frictions, and delays. According to these surveys, around a fifth of the importers are diversifying their suppliers, particularly those firms that are importing from the US and China, those firms that are importing inputs that are subject to disruption risks, such as critical materials, as Javier was mentioning, and also those firms that use what is defined as unique technologies. So they have no alternative, so they need to diversify because otherwise their production processes will not be taking place. Second, in the production stage, international groups are reevaluating where their production takes place. So around a tenth of these firms are diversifying their locations for production, or they are looking for a more reliable one, either through what is called nearshoring or through friendshoring. And finally, a majority of firms that are exporting to non-EU destinations plan to diversify their destinations in the following 2 years, particularly those firms that are exporting now to the US and China. So next question would be, what is the EU doing in terms of policy in this environment? So during 2025, we have seen steps towards increasing strategic autonomy. Based on the Draghi's report recommendations, the European Commission presented in January the so-called Competitiveness Compass. This compass consists of a planned itinerary for policy actions to develop these recommendations and to advance in closing the innovation gap, accelerating what is called the competitive decarbonization, and enhancing economic security. So policies by the new US administration have made more urgent a swift implementation of this agenda. So this agenda consists of a number of areas. Javier already talked about defense, so I would skip that this time. So on second, I would like to highlight what the EU is doing in terms of diversifying economic relationships. So here in the map, you can see the EU trade agreements that have been signed or are being negotiated in present. And so, I mean, the lack of advance at multilateral level, the EU has signed close to 40 trade agreements since 2001, when the unfinished Doha round under the WTO started. More recently, the Commission concluded negotiations with Mercosur and Indonesia, while it's progressing talks with similar agreements with countries like Australia, India, Philippines, Thailand, Malaysia, and United Arab Emirates. These markets, according to our estimations, could absorb up to 40% of the lost exports toward the US as a consequence of the tariffs that the Trump administration is imposing. And this, of course, depends on a full implementation of these trade agreements. So it's not something that is warranted. So in the context of increased disruptions in the supply of critical materials, an issue that Javier also mentioned before, and where China, of course, remains by far the biggest player, the EU is also implementing a diversification strategy. As part of the Critical Raw Materials Act, a number of projects have been selected, both in the EU and non-EU countries, to improve access to these inputs. So I don't want to take much time, but here you have on the right side a map of where these projects are located, both in the EU and outside the EU. And finally, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has accelerated both energy diversification and decarbonization. Around 70% of electricity today is generated by low-carbon sources, and clean tech industrialization, which, as Javier mentioned, is still quite weak in terms of the value chain, seems to be finally on the move in the European Union. There have been some progress in the last 2 years. And turning to technological dependencies, the EU remains weakly positioned along the full artificial intelligence value chain. We have Dutch company ASML, which is a world leader in chip printing machinery, and we have some apps and service companies like French Mistral that remains still an anecdotal evidence of how AI is being developed in Europe. During this year, we had also some good news as the supercomputer called Jupiter was presented in Germany, which was co-financed by the Commission and the German government. This is the second European supercomputer to get into the top 10 list of, in terms of global leaders. And it's the supercomputer that is the most resource efficient in the planet. So all of the energy that is consumed comes from renewable sources. Gigafactory plants are also a promising area for Europe. We have proposals that are equivalent to 10 times the amount that was allocated initially by the European Union. However, much more is needed to compete with the US and China along the full value chain. And one last aspect of strategic autonomy I would like to mention briefly, because it was also commented by Javier, is on the digital euro. So here I would only like to stress that this is a project that goes beyond providing a technical solution to the rise of digital payments. Non-EU payment wallets have become popular across Europe, and we also have a lot of stable coins being promoted by the private sectors and are expected to proliferate in the coming years. And last but not least, there have been an increase in the number of cyber attacks on financial and digital networks. So it's crucial also in terms of security of the financial infrastructure. And the ECB is very well aware of all these factors, and I think they are committed to push this project as soon as possible, because it's a critical one in terms of financial autonomy. So I would like to conclude with a review of what is still pending in terms of building solid EU capacities to address these challenges. And here to exemplify and to illustrate this, where we are in terms of the implementation of the Draghi recommendation, I would like you to show this picture that I generated with the Copilot AI. And here you can see, 1 year later of the presentation of the report, we see that while some progress has been made, there is a long and bumpy road ahead to arrive to what Draghi would describe as an ideal European Union. That's why we can see his frustration in the picture. And according to a report by the think tank EPIC, only this 11% of the recommendations have been fully implemented so far, and 20% partially. The rest are in progress or not being implemented at all. So, and what are the main milestones that are left in terms of addressing the existing challenges? Here I try to summarize all of them. So, these are the main milestones, and they seem to be also the most problematic ones, those that are not generating the necessary consensus among member states, and also in the context in which we are facing increased political fragmentation within the European Union. Draghi himself insisted during the anniversary of his report that all these elements are critical to be implemented in a fast way, as the rest of the world they are not going to wait for us in this competitiveness race. So it's critical that we implement them fully and quickly as possible. So here we have, of course, the usual suspects. We are looking for simpler and lower regulation, trying to reduce the fragmentation of the internal market. We want to reinforce how we provide public goods in a common way, increasing the coordination among member states. We need to review likely the competition framework to trying to push for an increase in the scale of our companies. As Javier mentioned, the Savings and Investment Union is, of course, an ingredient we cannot escape of implementing if we want to gain also a scale and efficiency. And on top of political difficulties, one of the main constraints, this is the last slide I will show you, is the lack of fiscal room we have to address the strategic investment gaps we are facing. So here in these two charts, I will try to summarize which is the degree of the challenge we are facing at present. So after the COVID crisis and the expected increase in age-related expenditure by governments, we are anticipating a huge increase in the level of public debt. Here we have the numbers for the aggregate of EU member states. So this would increase aggregate debt levels from 80%, more or less, which is the current level, to close to 120% of GDP. That means around 40 percentage points in 20 years. But then we have to think that starting this year, we are applying the new fiscal rules within the European Union, and that means there are medium-term fiscal plans to reduce this debt and try to provide sustainable finances. And that is the green bar. So through these adjustment plans, we expect this public debt level to be reduced to close to 65% of GDP. But then in turn, according to recent estimates by the ECB, we have that the strategic investment needs around 1.2 trillion euros per year, which is a figure equivalent to 7% of EU GDP. So assuming that we are covering this gap by 25% through the public expenditure, 100% in the case of defense, we estimate that this, the effect of implementing all this strategic investment, that will take us back to the starting point. That means adding around 50 points of the GDP to the debt level. So we are coming back again to the 20% ratio. So that means we are again in a situation in which the sustainability of public finances are in serious doubt of being achieved. So what can we do in this situation? Because it seems that we have to choose between consolidating or providing strategic autonomy. Of course, there are some ways that we can use to get to a sustainable scenario. So here is a proposal that you can see on the right-hand side is combining more flexibility to implement these investments. We have this year the fiscal escape clause associated with defense expenditure. We are calling to extending this escape clause to other strategic investments, like in innovation or the green transition. Then we need to strengthen the coordination in the provision of public goods. This could mean trying to take some of the pressure we are putting on national debt to common debt issuance. And this is not betting on having joint debt together by the sake of having it. Is about trying to reduce the pressure the national debt is already receiving in financial markets because of this expected increase in public debt. And we see some efficiency gains also in executing coordinated public procurement, for instance, for purchases of defense equipment, etc. And finally, we need to push with the rest of the Draghi report. It's not only about having strategic investments; it's also about reforming how markets are working now in the European Union. And that means reducing fragmentation, facilitating business activity. There is this estimation by the IMF recently estimating that around 40%, the barriers that we face in the goods market are equivalent to around 40% for the whole single market. And in the case of the service market, they're estimating around 100% of barriers coming from this fragmentation of the function of the EU single market. So it's clear that the challenge is huge, but the counterfactual we are risking is that we are not getting into the competitiveness race, and we are not getting also to the strategic autonomy situation. So there's a lot, I think, to talk about this. I don't think there is a common approach to deal with this challenge. So maybe we can extend a little bit the debate here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So try to maybe to use to speak closer to the mic if you can.
Yeah.
The only constraint. So sorry about it, but we have otherwise for people that are connected, they have some problems with the sound. And I cannot. No, this one is no. I prefer if you keep it. I will try to speak up, and then they can hear me. So thank you so much. I think we can open now the debate with the floor from this moment. There are many issues that have been put on the table, and I think that we can have a very nice session. So just to start, does anyone want to ask a first question? Okay.
I find this topic very interesting. I mean, it's probably one of the, since the euro began, we have been talking about how the euro is going. So, but nowadays, I feel, I am not super sure what is going on in the rest of Europe. But now in Spain, we have this huge fight between the millennial generation and the boomer generation about how the system is sustainable. I think that's another dimension to the problem that is making it difficult to think on a common goal. Because my generation has kind of the feeling that the structure that we have, or the structure that we have so far in terms of society and so on, is no longer much sustainable. So I think one of the problems that we are facing right now is that our generation, our younger generations, are not really feeling that what we have been living, at least our parents or when we were younger, is going to be sustainable in the future. And I don't know, but what I'm trying to tell you is that of this demographic issue, how this demographic issue can interact with all these other problems that you have pointed out in your presentation.
Thank you for raising this point, because I think it's also very important, and it complements all the things that have been said here.
So we've been discussing the strategic dependencies of the European Union. I was wondering whether, you touched upon many issues, but I was wondering whether you can elaborate upon two more. One is FDI. So what we've seen in the news recently is that it will not only depend on other countries for our imports, but also on some strategic production sites in Europe are owned by foreign companies. So there is these headlines 1 month ago or so that in the Netherlands you have this Chinese company producing chips, if I remember correctly, that has been intervened by the Dutch government, because they wanted to secure the supply of chips for the automotive industry. And then the Chinese government said, okay, if you're going to intervene the company, then we're not so sure that we can export our rare earth materials to the Netherlands. Then my question is that, if we can start thinking about how big is this problem. Was this an isolated case, or do we have data that can tell us more, about these kind of issues that can surge at any moment in time? And second, it's migration. We do depend in Europe because of our basically demographic structure on attracting people from other places. And of course we compete in a global...
So related to your point.
Exactly. And so we're basically competing in the global market, so to say, to attract people here. But if we don't manage in the future to attract people here, then we are in trouble also for the fiscal, on the fiscal side, right? Because of the demographic structure. So I was just wondering whether you can...
I was just looking for Jacob. I think Jacob's not here in the room, so I think he left because he was over there. Yeah. It's a pity because he was the former head of the research department of the Bank of the Netherlands, the central bank. So maybe he had maybe something to say over the first point. Check the hand. He was there.
My question is very much in line with Jacob. I wanted to ask about the role of FDI, and I will make a very precise and perhaps controversial question. So we see indeed that although what's happening now with these strategic autonomy discussions is that China for the past decade has probably understood what's happening, and it has started massively investing on greenfield projects as well on mergers and acquisitions within the single market. So basically, we have a common policy for trade, but the screening of FDI, there is a coordination mechanism in the European Union, but it's still a national thing, because of course it goes in the line of national security, so we'll never agree on that. So basically we see that some countries, such as Hungary, for the past years, have been welcoming massive loads of Chinese investments, some of them with EU funds. So my question, for example, yesterday I think in Figueruelas, in Zaragoza, it was laid the first installment of this massive battery plant by the main Chinese company CATL. Do you think that this type of investments, for example the one in Zaragoza, make the European Union more or less dependent on China, on general of the world?
So for this round, maybe one more.
Yes, one thing that hasn't been mentioned in the discussion, so it's something very, very, very interesting, of course, is governance. Let me put it, summarize it with a very negative sentence. I mean, the European Union is a basket case when it comes to making decisions. So, shall we change the governance? Shall we consider this a need? I realize perhaps I'm being naive here because obviously the political opportunity of doing that is an issue. But the question is whether we can move forward with the current governance system we have. Thank you.
So we stop here this round. I don't know, when you start asking, maybe you could have maybe address the person that maybe you were more interested in the panel, or maybe if they are open. No? So, but well, Germany is always taking the lead. It used to.
So I start with Daniel's question on the
Generational conflict, because there was explicit question, how is it in other European countries? And yes, it's comparable. So currently there's a crisis within the Chancellor's party, CDU, Conservatives, exactly on this issue. So the coalition agreed on some intermediate small reform, I would say, but the young generation has exactly these concerns. So some people, I don't think so, but some people even believe that this can threaten the current German government, that it might fall, because now 15 young deputies within the CDU threaten to not support this reform. So yes, it's an issue. Do I have an answer? Definitely you cannot learn anything from Germany on retirement and pension. So I think we need to observe what's happening elsewhere in Europe, and in particular also, so some more investment-based forms of retirement. So I think there's nothing to learn, and yes, it's a big problem, and there will be a generational conflict. So maybe I take the second one, but there are so many good ones. So I think the governance one is maybe the easiest, because of course, you are right, and we are in big trouble. So I had a slide on major events that led to the situation where we are, and I started with the global financial crisis, and I should have started with the European Constitution. So 2005, when France and the Netherlands rejected the European Constitution, and this was probably the game changer. So until 2005, we were used to increasing steps of European integration, and we had a vision, and one of the visions was more European integration, the young generation, at least at universities, was attracted by the European idea, and this seems to be gone, and probably there was a political breakpoint, which was already in 2005, rejection of the European Constitution, and the economic breakpoint with the euro crisis after the global financial crisis. So, of course, yes, you are right, but sadly I share your pessimism. So I would suggest to support the European Union, European Commission, because we have no better one. But maybe you had a very positive final opening statement, so maybe you have some more hope than I have.
No, I was going to say that.
Just to know, how do you feel about it? I mean, all the three of you about if you are more optimist or not, because when we are saying about what Andy was saying, that you can imagine that in some way we have lost a good opportunity, that we have lost our track as Europeans, and now that we are more or less lost, so that's why we need a compass. That's why we need the competitive compass. But if you analyze the compass, you see that there are many things inside. Sometimes maybe, in my opinion, I'm not sure, but in my opinion that maybe we have too many things. And this is always we are with the same problem. We had the Europe 2010 strategy, and then the COP report, and then the Europe 2020 strategy. And now I think that we finally are learning, but we are learning very slowly. Because then when we start this strategy, we are using as a background reports, maybe the Leta report and the Draghi report, that they were just the rivalry between the Council and the Commission to have the two reports, and then we put this with other things as well, and then we have this competitiveness, competitiveness compass, but finally we don't have a clear guidance, or this is what at least this is my opinion that I put also on the table. I would like you to discuss maybe discuss about it, or just bearing in mind this when you are giving your opinion, because you said quite a clear 5 points for the future. So this is maybe it's a guideline for a working program, and then I think you put on the table also the very clear dilemma that we have right now. That is the debt consolidation versus how do you put it? This was consolidation. Versus strategic autonomy. I think this is real the big point. And if you, for example, following the Silicon continent, the block of Luis Garicano, you can. All these points are there, but you will get a little depressed.
Well, I think there is broad consensus that we need to move forward, but so far we have been moving forward on the things that are more on the side of Commission competencies. That means moving forward in terms of signing trade deals, approving these omnibus regulation packages that goes through a quicker procedure without taking into account stakeholders' consultation and the usual Parliament and Council procedures. So they are trying to move fast in the things they can control. The problem is that when we arrive to things that are more political and that needs broad agreements between member states. And there are still many different views of how the EU should be working. So, and he mentioned governance. Of course, we need to have a more agile governance, but to change the governance, we need unanimity. So that's the starting point. And if you see how fragmented are countries within themselves, how the Parliament is fragmented, we have the Commission with the lowest approval rate by the Parliament itself. So it's very difficult to reach broad consensus on many things. So the transition to, for instance, multi-speed integration is now not possible because the treaties don't allow to do this, but there have been some initiatives trying to go over these limitations. We have, for instance, the discussion on what is called the 28th regime. So they want to implement regulations that countries voluntarily can adhere to, so getting easier to trade between member states for those countries that want to have common rules and so on, a common commercial law, for instance. And there's also this initiative by our Minister Carlos Cuerpo on competitiveness. There's a competitiveness group, I think. So they discuss things in small groups and try to find a way to overcome this strong limitation that is given by the current rules. I mean, this is what we can do at this stage. We cannot do more. So, and I'm pessimistic.
I mean, let me be optimistic, no? Just for the sake of argument, no? So I think that there are two underlying questions, I mean, in the responses, and Andreas started with the political part, no? And trying to go back a bit to that. So there are two underlying questions in many of your questions, no? That I think underlie our debate on economics sometimes, no? And then the first one is that, do we really believe in democratic institutions or not? No, because sometimes, I mean, we do about this, the Chinese success and then whatever, and we have to do like the Americans. There's a question, fundamental questions about democratic institutions, free markets, and whatever, no? And related to that is, are the institutions we have valid for, let's say, younger generations? Because at the end of the day, I mean, we were discussing about this yesterday, I think. The European project is a project of people like us. No, so it's technocrats at a certain moment. I mean, and Pau was there as well. Pau was there as well, no? But it's something that is kind of fun. So actually, the bold movements have been sometimes, I mean, without people knowing, no, or getting to notice that, no. So the point is, I mean, how to reform these institutions that govern the whole thing at the national level and at the European level. And I think there are all these debates, and the other day we were talking about this in Alicante. No, I think you were there, on independence of institutions, on how to make democratic institutions more accountable, more transparent. No, I think these are debates that you know, or this debate on the populist debate on, for example, on the Fed not being independent. Actually, it's bringing a healthy debate on whether some, you know, trusted institution like the central banks had to be more accountable, more transparent, no, and had to connect. No? So first question is this, and do we believe in democracy institutions and democratic institutions? And this is, we have to answer this question to answer this, many of the other ones. No? And the second one, which is related, is do we want a more open or a more closed economy? Okay. But of course, I mean, the subtitle is, can we afford this? No? Then with this, let me go to the positive part. No? So I will translate it into a response to a dialogue on this question. No? So new governance. Of course, I mean, the point is that, I mean, this consensus-based and technocratically based model we have in Europe is useful to get consensus with when you have a lot of different people, but it's not useful to make executive decisions and to move forward. No? So the government has to change first. I mean, to have this leg on being more transparent and more linked to younger generations. So I think that there are initiatives on that side. And the second thing is that the decision-making process will have to be reformed because there's a EU enlargement will come, and then when all these new countries come in, and this will have to come, I hope, at some point, then you need new governance because otherwise it's impossible to vote. I mean, when you sit in a table with 27 people and you have to vote, it's impossible to vote. No? So there will be a reform of governance, and the governance we have is good, I mean, to get consensus, but it's not suited for the challenges that we have. No? And that I agree with you. No? The second thing, and this is a positive one, is so the European Union is a very trusted partner all over the world. So people do business with the Chinese. When you talk to people in Latin America, for example, so we have to talk to the central bank. So I mean, they do business with the Chinese, no? But they would prefer to do the same business with the Europeans, no? Because they are more trusted, they respect the rule of law, so they are not then, if you don't pay, then they are taking over whatever, no? So I think that there is leverage there, no? And I like this map that you put, David, no? With all these trade deals. So that means there is a lot of people around there that are willing to keep on cooperating, no? In different ways. So I think that the EU is a trusted partner. It has to leverage on that, and there is space, no? And finally, there is another thing that the EU does, no? And I think that sometimes it's a bit undervalued related to this one, and it's that the EU projects open institutions, no? And this is a bit related to why this is trusted. So whenever, I mean, there are all these trade deals. I mean, Jacopo knows this by heart, no? So then in these trade deals, I mean, you have like whatever social conditions on social, you know, on the labor markets, on climate, on everything, no? So the whole package is a better package than just I give you this thing, this tariff or the other, no? And together with that, there is the projection of, let's say, of the social model. No? But I think that it is a moment in which we cannot go in economic terms to the next step without moving the political part. No? And this resembles something that Andreas was saying. So there are political things to take all the generations, to take into account all these trusted partners that had to move all the way with economics. No? So I think this is also what is new now. No? That really, I mean, the institutions and politics had to be modified to have people on board. No? But I made a political speech basically. Yeah. Not so much. They did economics. Yeah.
I think there are a couple of questions that we didn't address. I think one on FDI, I think, was on that side.
And migration.
And migration. That's the other. I leave you migration maybe if you want. But yeah, on FDI, I'm sure those kind of investments you were mentioning, particularly of Chinese companies in electric vehicle manufacturing. And not making happy technocrats in Brussels. And the thing is that this is a reflection of the kind of frictions that are arising between the strategic dependencies we have and our policy priorities. So we want to move forward with the policies toward a more sustainable economy, adapting to climate change and so on. And then we impose tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, and we scrutinize what Chinese are investing here in Europe. So, but this is the logical outcome of not being autonomous in this kind of activities. And yeah. The approach by Chinese companies or the government, which because always the government is behind all these movements, is that they're selecting their partners very carefully in terms of their friendshoring approach. You know, they have good relation with Hungary, so most of the investment in this sector has been there. But now, as they have good relations with the Spanish government as well, they are turning their attention to our country, and this, of course, is getting increased scrutiny by the European Commission, because this is the kind of things they are looking at very carefully. They implemented, I think it was 4 or 5 months ago, a new monitoring tool to follow how products that might be diverted from the US market are arriving to the single market. So there are a lot of work behind these tools. But as I said, this is the reflection of the kind of frictions that arise when you are not self-sufficient in these things. I mean, the same happened with the US and China in this trade war. I mean, at some point they realized they're mutually dependent, so they cannot get into a trade war. So same happens here in the EU.
Maybe on migration, and maybe briefly, maybe you want to take another round of questions, I don't know. So on migration, I think that it's problematic that the advantages of migration are not sufficiently emphasized. Probably this is at least my impression, that this is worse in Germany. There's heterogeneity across Europe. So in Germany, we have no narrative, migration is bad, migration needs to be scaled down. So I think what we observe in migration, we also observe in other policy areas. We discussed the European Union, that the populists set the discourse, and the old parties, in quotation marks, follow to a certain extent, a mild version of it. This happens with migration in Germany. No political party, not even the Green Party, has during the federal election this year emphasized the positive benefits, for example, to solve the demographic problems. European Union, no political party wants more federalization. Yeah? So there's no positive counter-narrative. There's only a shift towards a bit more towards the right. And yeah, my impression is that there's more, also due to the economic situation, a more positive approach to many of these things in Spain, at least to a certain degree.
Also, here with the political side, you mentioned the necessity of a reform of the governance to make it more agile, more quick and so. But the problem is that to reach this reform of the governance are the members who have to agree on that. And we have in most of the European countries the rise of anti-European, let's say, institutions. So the problem is that the ones that are maybe in charge or of these reforms are the ones that precisely don't want to go further in the integration project. And you mentioned the technocrats. It's one of the things they may don't like, this technocracy in a way that it's something that comes from elsewhere. The other side is maybe, and in line of the papers of Rodriguez Jose about the geography of this content, that it's maybe not only political, there's an economic part behind that, but so far we have not found a solution because the coalition policy is not working that well in that sense of these left behind places that are where the anti-European, let's say, or populist parties against Europe are taking the majority of the votes. So the problem is we might agree on the direction of the governance reform, but the problem is that what we would like to, it's maybe not what the succession of elections that we are seeing in each of the countries are leading to. That's the negative side. So.
positive, and then I think it also good to. So one good thing in this, please correct me because I'm here, I'm talking, or at least we perceive is that, let's say, many anti-Europeans have been converted into slow Europeans. No, so we don't see big movements saying, okay, we don't want the euro, we don't want that. No, so this, let's say, in a sense, speaks for the strength of the project. I mean, this is a really very slow European, so nothing moves. No, but yeah, I mean, you have put it very, very. And the second thing is that. And you were talking about that. No, I think that we are now on the losing side of narratives, no, and everything's about narratives. So Andreas was talking about that. Even the narratives about these left behind regions, no, of Andreas and so on. I mean, this technocracy versus the people, or centralization versus the people. No, I think that the discussion, if we were to talk about arguments, is more balanced. No. But it is true that maybe technocracies or technocratic, I mean, you and me, no, us, no, have not been very successful in translating into actionable narratives for broader parts of the population. That's why I was talking before about, we need to be, central banks, no, being more transparent, talking about people. We are devoting a lot of effort to, financial literacy, to communication, to so on and so forth, no? Because we have lost, I mean, these narratives, and I think a lot has to do with that, no? But,
I think this is one hypothesis, that the populist parties develop into slow Europeans. So this is the positive view, and I think what speaks in favor. The prime example is Meloni. After she came to power, she softened. This would be good. So this idea would be you blame Brussels like the Americans blame Washington, D.C., but they wouldn't question the United States of America. So let's hope it's like this. The more negative view of the world would be Meloni has no partners. What does she want to do? She needs to cooperate with Germany and France and Spain, but once more and more countries become populist, they will work together and disintegrate the European Union. Yes, so sadly, times are too serious, so it's I don't want to find out what's true, but there's hope, I agree.
Well, it seems that some of the countries in the EU are comfortable in their position that they remain in the group, but they oppose any kind of initiative. I'm thinking basically on Hungary. If you think what is Hungary doing in the European Union at present, I mean, they have not received, if not wrong, any fund from the NGO program because of this conditionality, and this thing on conditionalities is getting more and more important. And then part of the proposal by the Commission for the next multi-financial framework is to strengthen the conditionality when accessing funds. So the situation for these kind of countries is not going to improve. So I'm not really sure. I mean, what kind of game they are playing at the current stage, to be honest. I don't know if they want to kill the thing from inside, or I have no idea. Sometimes I have the feeling they are like satellites of other maybe powers in the world.
So I don't know whether they want to kill the European Union. This is their business model, is being part of the European Union, but being closely linked to China, Russia. So it's an entry point for China and Russia to the European Union. Once they leave the European Union, they lose value for Russia and China.
The last point, and sorry for inciting in this, but my problem is the counter-argument versus the populist. No? Because we talk about populists, and we have a very clear argument about what's the problem. The problem is on the bureaucracy, on the elites, on the whatever. No? So they can be right or they can be wrong, and they have a clear argument. My point is, what is the counter-argument? What is Europe? What that we are offering to the people? I mean, my feeling is that Europe doesn't know what it is. I mean, you are not the States, you are not China, what you are offering, so I guess that in the past you were offering like civil rights, enlightenment, and so on, but the feeling I have, at least I'm talking of my generation, because it's what I have around now, but the people around me says that their life is no better now than it used to be for my parents, which grew up outside Europe. I don't know, I know that correlation doesn't mean causation, but I know that, but most of people know. So the thing is that I'm missing kind of the people lives by hopes somehow. So what are the hopes for the people? What they should expect from the project? That's my main narrative that I'm missing here. Not here, but in general on the European argument.
I think your impressions are founded in data. I mean, our colleague there was mentioning the literature by Rodriguez Posen. I think it was himself that estimated that I think it was around 0.5% of population in the EU was living in regions that did not improve their situation between 2000 and current times. So, I mean, it's a matter of how your economy, how your household economy is going, that is not going better. And it's pretty simple, and you cannot offer anything else but improving that situation. And I mean, Javier was talking before about how much do we estimate democracy in those terms. That's why many people are questioning themselves if that is the best alternative we have today, because they are not seeing the result of this approach. Of course, I'm not saying that any other alternative is better. It's just how democracy these days are offering you economic results. And in that sense, the European Union has not succeeded in providing these tools. And when I say European Union, I say also national member states, because the European Union does not function alone, but with the states. No? So.
Yeah, I think that Alex wanted to apply something.
I hope that another has welcome today, was better. I wanted to reply to the gentleman. What does the European Union offer us? It offers us a large space where we can act and realize our lives as citizens. Okay? Where we have, as you said, civil rights, democracy, free speech. This is what the European Union is offering us. Go to China and get your votes. Good luck. Okay? Or go to the US. You might end up in El Salvador in jail. Okay, so this is what we have, and actually, I'm tempted to say that it is also our responsibility as citizens to understand what this is. This is not peanuts.
No, I know it's not peanuts, but my point is that if that much people doesn't get that, it's because probably you are not communicating properly. I mean, it's not that I'm thinking that. Of course I don't think that. I know what Europe means. But the people is clearly underestimating the advantages of being in Europe. So obviously it's an error in the communication, because people is unable to understand what are the benefits of being in this situation.
I endorse that thing. I mean, the point, I think that in all this debate, we lack counterfactuals. No? So the problem is that we lack counterfactuals. For example, I mean, I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
I was thinking that maybe you want to
reply.
To make your comment, because I think it was written with the same question, and then you can answer together.
No, maybe I was trying to get on the point that I would like to extend, because I think nowadays we are complaining a lot, and you hear that here as well. There's a little bit of pessimism in the debate, which is okay, which I think very common across Europe. We see it everywhere. So on the other hand, the last week, if I may bring that in, I was at the European Commission at the event, and it was about the new economic doctrine. And there were basically two elements. It's like it's economic independency, that it was mentioned here as well. That's the key. Basically, we don't need the Chinese, we don't need the Americans, we don't need oil from the Arab world. We can solve everything in Europe. It's unrealistic. And if it's realistic, it will cost us so much money that we cannot afford it. Like I think was showing. On the other hand, the second thing is we want to have an industrial policy, and meaning we are going to select sectors, put a lot of money in it, and then we are going to be the champions of the world. It's not going to happen. Europe has never been champion of the world. We are not good technological leaders, we are good technological followers. And I think we just have to accept that kind of situation that the 21st century won't be the European century. We have to be humble. We are living in a world where other parts of the world are taking the lead, and we have to do our best to find a suitable place in that setting. And that setting can be, well, we're all international economists for our comparative advantages. We're relatively smart compared to the rest of the world. We have open and democratic systems, maybe not perfect, but it definitely gives, let's say, an opportunity to involve many people in positive projects. But then, indeed, like you're saying, it is a responsibility. It's a responsibility of everyone, individuals, private companies, and let's keep this responsibility. As private individuals, it's not only the youngsters who are complaining, but also the people who are retiring because they have to work longer, they have less retirement benefits. So everyone is complaining, but it's just unrealistic to fulfill all the complaints. And then I think that's a responsibility. Yeah, how can youngsters contribute to a better society? How can they contribute to legalizing this comparative opportunity in the world? How can companies do that? The business world, it's like we never see the business about complaining, but at the same time, they're out of money. That would never be more profitable. There would never be more exports, but that is high all the uncertainty. So it is possible, but then, yeah, less complaining, more realizations.
I would like
to completely disagree.
Completely.
Not on everything, but I think you have a wrong assumption. And this assumption is that we can keep our liberal democracy in Europe and can just trade with the tech-dominated US capitalism and the state-dominated Chinese capitalism. If this was possible, fine, we could accept this role, but the speech of Vance in Munich has shown us this is not possible. The Russian intervention in Ukraine has shown us this is not possible, because Ukraine is a threat to the Russian model, because if Ukraine is successful and a liberal democracy is flourishing in Kiev, this threatens the Russian system. If Europe is successful, this threatens the tech Trumpism in the US. So what Ukraine is to Russia is Europe to the US. And given I disagree with this assumption, I think accepting it is maybe it's unlikely, and we have this pessimism, but at least we should try and take the small chance.
I understand your point, but then we go into I still consider there is a kind of tail risk that basically all the bad things that might happen will actually happen, which could be the case, of course. But I think positioning ourselves on a tail risk, that's really, it will be very costly at least. We'll have to give a lot of welfare if we want to defend ourselves, military speaking, but also in terms of economic independence and so on. Let's be honest, we kill our social security system in Europe if we have to do that. It's the only way we can finance it. And are we really willing to do that?
Yeah, we want to keep all the good things that we have in the EU, that are many, of course. There's a cost to be paid, but we need to communicate and argue well which are the costs and if people are ready to assume them. For instance, this afternoon I was reading that France is proposing again to reinstate a voluntary military service for 1 year, paid one for people aged 18, 19, and it's the same thing that it has happened in Belgium and Netherlands, and maybe Germany is following likely. So, I mean, if we explain to people what is coming or what's going on, they can understand which kind of sacrifices they are facing. But we need to explain, and then people need to agree on that, because the model is voted among all citizens in the EU. If that's our preference, then we vote for that. If not, we get to the Chinese or American model. I mean, that's people has to decide on that.
I will finish with this, but I put this for you as well, because I would like to know the vision we're talking about all these things that are really important, all these issues and the strategy and so on, but then we have maybe the medium run constraint in terms of monetary dominance versus fiscal dominance, and this, I think, the dilemma that we were talking about this strategy to be more independent at the world level or autonomous strategic autonomy versus the fiscal constraint that we have in the long run. And this fiscal constraint is, well, finally, fiscal policies are really closely democratic link, but then even in democratic systems, we have decided to transfer an important power to a more democratic, and in this case in Europe, federal level, that is the central bank. And so we are now maybe all these years, all these shocks, we've been moving from one initial governance, European governance and EU governance, where we were in a clear monetary dominant regime, and then we are maybe shifting little by little to something else. Not that we don't know, I don't know. But just to, I will finish with this because we already have passed the time limit.
But now is when it's warm up. So
we have disconnected from outside, so we
okay, that's cool. So we. No, I think that you were talking about it. I think we have an issue with let me put it like as when we analyze the economy. So the problem is that sometimes we become lazy, you know. So I mean, we want things to be as we know, as we understand them, and to look at the reality with the models that we have. To look. So we're in times of change. So two remarks. No, the first one is that. So at some point, I mean, we need to have people that understood how pandemics interacted were integrated in economic models. Then we were recruiting data scientists. We are working with people from political scientists. We are working with data scientists, energy experts. So now we have in the central bank, we have to become energy experts. Now we need people that understand geopolitics and so when we go to the market, I mean, we really are disconcerted. And now we're trying to find political scientists that.
It's fascinating.
No, it's exactly. It's fascinating. Institutions. So there are new elements that also we had to abandon the. I mean, we've been abandoning continuously. I mean, over the past years, our comfort zone.
We're more
because
in an ivory tower, but
exactly.
It's not the case.
It's not, no. So whether if you want to talk about monetary policy, you have to go to institutions, to transparency, to communication. I mean, so in that sense, I mean, we had to rethink many of the tools, no? And the second thing in which we had to rethink is the horizon. No, we were talking about the medium run, and also to understand these things. Also, we are creating now an office which is called Global Trends and Institutional Analysis. So now we're in this process of we're like creating like a brand new office within the structure of the economics, which is this global trends, no? Because many of these things that we're talking about really exceed, I mean, the horizon in which we are used to. No, we're medium run, but for us, medium run is 2 years. No, we have this forecast. I mean, Paco likes this forecast that we fail in 3 years' time. But these are what these guys. So, for example, we interact now with some guys which are called futurists. No, so this is not. I mean, there are guys that they are futurists. So this is not like rappel. No, but this is there are people that say no. There are mega trends that dominate, no? So you have to say, okay, because sometimes, I mean, with this horizon, I mean, we miss the fact that maybe all this political discontent, these are really long-ranging trends, no? So there are two things. I mean, one, we need to interact, we economists, we interact with all these, with more crazy people, new profiles, new things. And second, we really have to change, or at least integrate longer horizons to be able to understand this, no? And I think on that we are, us in particular, we're still, in this learning process. Everybody is, no? But I mean, at least we're starting to be conscious of that, no? So I think that we need to get back to some more like long-term economics, how this interacts, institutions. So things that were a bit out of our discussions. No? So economic was a dominating profession, no? So we were dominating, and now we have to integrate all these elements. And we're integrating them. No? So I don't know if with success or not, but we are trying to. No?
No, I think we